There's a humorous story told how God tells Moses, Moses, we have a commandment, Lo yisvashel gedi b'chalev imoi, do not cook the meat of a young goat or a young animal in its mother's milk. So Moshe tells God, oh, I get it, God. We are not allowed to eat meat and milk together. God says, Moses, listen again, focus. Lo yisvashel gedi b'chalev imoi, do not cook meat in his mother's milk. Oh, I got it, God. We should have two sets of dishes in the house. No, Moshe, you didn't hear me. Let me say it again. Lo yisvashel gedi b'chalev imoi, do not cook the kid in the milk of its mother. Oh, I get it, God. You got to wait 6 hours after you eat meat before you can have milk. So God tells Moses, okay, Moses, do it your way. The prohibition of lo yisvashel gedi, not to cook the meat of a kid in the milk of his mother, is actually mentioned 3 times in the Torah. And Rashi tells us that these 3 times are to teach us that there are 3 prohibitions. One is not to eat meat and milk together. Number 2, not to cook meat and milk together. And number 3, not to have any hana'ah, not to have any benefit from meat and milk together. In other words, you cannot take this mixture of meat and milk together that is prohibited for a Jew to eat and give it to a dog, because you have hana'ah, you have benefit. Or similarly, we know that when it comes to chazir, when it comes to the prohibition of pig, we're not allowed to eat pig, but you can wear a belt or shoes that are made from pigskin. So we have this additional prohibition when it comes to meat and milk, that one cannot even benefit from it either. What is the reason behind it? Why is it so that the Torah does not allow us to do this? And to understand this on 5 levels, on the level of Pshat and Remiz and Drush and Soid and Chassidus. On the level of Pshat, the simple level of why the Torah is so adamant against cooking meat and milk together, is because the Torah wants to prevent us from being cruel. Torah wants us to refrain from our sadistic acts. And therefore Torah says it's not enough that you're not cruel to animals, but you also have to have sensitivity towards animals. And therefore, if you're going to take a young goat or a young calf and put this calf in the milk of its mother, and you're going to cook it and you're going to eat it, this is a very, very cruel act. Even a simple person could understand how cruel this is. And therefore, the Torah is telling us as follows. Number 1, don't eat the kid in the milk of its mother. And number 2, even more than that. So we refrain from this, and to prevent this action of eating the actual meat that was cooked in the milk of its mother, the Torah says you shouldn't cook it either. And number 3, not only is the prohibition against a young kid, a young animal, and the milk of its mother, but any meat, together with any milk that is kosher, is also prohibited. And if this is true for the kid and its mother, that we should be sensitive to animals and not be cruel and savage and brute, how much more so we have to realize when it comes to another human being to be sensitive to their needs and not, God forbid, be cruel, and to go out of our way to make sure that they have what they need, and in no way to embarrass them or hurt their feelings, etc., etc. And so much more so that to prevent the eating of the kid in the milk of its mother, we actually have 2 sets of dishes, and we separate after we eat meat 6 hours to have milk. So what? So that we should never come to actually eat the kid that was cooked in the milk of its mother. That is the message, and that is the reason, on a simple level of Pshat, of why the Torah prohibits the cooking of meat and milk together. What is the remez? What is the hint to this? Rabbeinu Bechaya, or the Bachya, tells us that the hint is that in the world to come, when Mashiach will come, meat and milk will be kosher. We will be able to eat food that had meat and milk cooked together. That's the remez, and we'll soon see why. What is drush? What is the homiletics? The homiletics also applies to the halacha. So we find that Rambam in the Sefer HaMitzvahs gives two commandments. Negative commandment 186 and also negative commandment 187. In negative commandment 186 he says we are forbidden from cooking a mixture of meat and milk together. In Mitzvah 187 he says there's a prohibition that we are forbidden from eating a mixture of meat and milk together. The Rambam says even though it's mentioned 3 times, there are only 2 prohibitions because eating is also having hana'ah, is also benefiting from it. And therefore he counts these 2 prohibitions as 1 prohibition. And furthermore he says, why is it that the Torah simply says lo yisvashel, not to cook? It should say don't eat. So the Rambam answers based on the Gemara that the Torah is teaching us that even if you ate a mixture of meat and milk, but you had no benefit from it, in other words, it was so hot that it burnt your throat, and therefore you did not benefit from it, still in all, you violate this prohibition because of the fact that you ate it. And that's why the Torah does not use the word achila, to eat, because normally when it says do not eat, you must benefit from the taste and the enjoyment of eating that mixture. And here the Torah tells us that even if you don't benefit, you're also prohibited. This is the drush. And the Rambam goes on to say, in the book of Meir Nevuchim, the Guide for the Perplexed, what is the reason behind it? Why is it that one should not eat from this mixture? And he goes on to say that this was actually a cultish practice. There used to be cults in the days of old that would put on a jacket or clothing that was a mixture of wool and linen, and then they would make a potion of meat and milk. They would go out into the crops and pour the meat and the milk onto the crops. And this way they would overcome all the forces in the universe, and they would be blessed with good crops. And then they would drink and eat from this mixture of meat and milk together. And because of this, says the Rambam, who was anti-Egyptian cults and cults in general, says the Rambam, the iconoclastic, that we are not allowed to eat a mixture of meat and milk together. That's the drush. What is the answer al pi soid? What is the reason, according to the esoteric level of Torah, of why meat and milk are prohibited? So we find that the Rekanti tells us that the reason why we should not mix meat and milk together is because meat and milk together represent foreign forces. Milk is something which flows, which is white, implying chesed, kindness. Kindness is given from above to below. It flows downward. The meat, which is red and blood, represents gevura, represents severity, represents judgment. And therefore there are 2 opposite worlds, and therefore they clash. And because of this, we should not cook or eat meat and milk together. This is the answer based on Soid, on the esoteric level of the Torah. What does Chassidus say? Chassidus comes along and asks a question. What do you mean that we shouldn't mix 2 opposites together? On the contrary, that is the entire objective of Torah. The objective of Torah is to create a synthesis in the world. The objective of Torah is to create shalom. As the Rambam says, that the whole reason why God gave the Torah to the Jewish people was to create peace in the world. And therefore he waited for a time when the Jews were at peace one with the other, to give them a book of peace, to bring peace to the entire world. So the idea of peace and shalom is when you have two negative or opposite forces, you come together and you compromise. And that is the ultimate objective of Torah. So why is it that we're not allowed to eat meat and milk together? On the contrary, we should be commanded to eat meat and milk together. And Chassidus explains as follows. Where do we say that one has the ability to unite chesed and gevura, kindness and severity, and make it one? That is true in the spiritual worlds. Over there in the spiritual worlds, each attribute, chesed independently and gevura independently, is humble, and therefore it has the ability to become subsumed and united with the opposite attribute. But down here in the physical world, in the world of yesh, in the world of reality, in the world of ego, when you take two opposites and you unite them, you have a clash. And therefore it's disturbing and even unhealthy. And this is understood with the famous example that we say in the Amidah. When we finish the Amidah, we take 3 steps back, and we say, Osa Shalom Bimramav, Hu Yasa Shalom Aleinu. Osa Shalom Bimramav, the one who makes peace on high, should make peace to us down here. What's the peace on high? So the Medrash says as follows. On high, you have 2 angels. And these 2 angels are Malach Mochael and Malach Gavriel. Angel Mochael, Angel Michael, he's the angel over the water, representing kindness. Angel Gavriel, he is the angel over fire. When these 2 angels get together, they put each other out. However, when they stand before God, and God calls them together, because of God's greatness, because of God's holiness, they become totally nullified to God's aura. They become subsumed in God's holiness, and therefore they're able to stand side by side. But the moment they leave the presence of God, again, one begins to extinguish the other. And the same is true with these 2 concepts of meat and milk. One is kindness, one is severity. On a heavenly spiritual level, they could unite. But down here in this world, they are contrary and contradictory one to the other. However, when Mashiach will come, and then it says, V'nigla kavod Hashem, v'ro kol baso yachtov, that the glory of God will become revealed to the entire world, and every flesh, even the flesh, will see God and be united with God. Then we'll be able to overcome the material aspect of the meat and the milk, and we are able to transcend that physical negative attribute, and we have the ability to truly unite the chesed and the gevura, the kindness and the severity, yachtav, and make them one. So here we see how every detail in Torah, from Torah law all the way down to rabbinic law, has a major impact on how we live and how we eat and our health. And therefore the Torah is concerned not even to mix meat and milk together. A story is told that in the city of Lumja, once Rabbi Akiva Eger, the famous codifier, came, and the entire town was very excited to see him, and they lined up, and everybody got a glimpse at him, and some were able to shake his hand. And finally, when he came into the home in which he was residing, there was a line outside for people to visit him one by one and to ask him to resolve different questions in the Talmud and advice for life. There was one woman by the name of Ethel, and she had 9 sons, and she came to Rabbi Akiva Eger and said, look, you know, 8 of my 9 children are great Torah scholars, and they study and they understand. I have one son by the name of Moshe Noach. And Moshe Noach, for some reason, he can't get it. He studies the Talmud, but it doesn't go in. And to say that he's a stupid kid, he's not a stupid kid because he knows math and he knows the sciences. He's able to get all the other secular studies, but when it comes to the study of Talmud, it just doesn't connect. Rabbi Kiva Eger listens for a few moments, and he says, you know, the Talmud tells us that one should be careful that little children eat kosher, because if they eat non-kosher, it could block their minds and block their hearts. So Ethel says, Rebbe, are you saying to me that I'm feeding my child treif, non-kosher? God forbid. I only feed them kosher. He says, look, I'm not telling you that you feed them non-kosher, but it's possible that one day he ate something outside of the house that wasn't kosher. Okay, they heard what the rabbi said. The rabbi then blessed them and said, let your child continue to study Torah and God will help him that he will be successful. But the husband wasn't satisfied. He had to figure out what went on over here. He goes over to his son, Moshe Noach, and says, Moshe Noach, tell me, did you ever eat treif? That's treif? No, God forbid. Did you ever eat outside of the house? He said, I always eat in the house. What do you mean? He starts thinking. He says, you know, you're right. A number of years ago, it was Hanukkah. It was around 1805. And I was coming home from school early to light the menorah. As most schools end early on Hanukkah, so you can light the menorah right when the sun begins to set. And on the way home, I passed by a hotel that had a chasana, that had a wedding, the Jewish wedding. They saw some yeshiva students, and they always like yeshiva students to come into the wedding to give a chayis, to give, you know, some more entertainment. So they invite us into the wedding. We go into the wedding. And while we're there, the host gives us a bowl of chicken soup. So I figured, look, it's a kosher hotel, and it's a kosher caterer, glatt kosher, why not? So I participated in the mitzvah, I made a bracha, and we ate the soup. That's what happened. That's the only time I can remember that perhaps I ate outside of the house. The father says, we got to get to the bottom of this. He goes back to the hotel, says, tell me something. Do you have any records of your weddings? Of course, everything's on file, every detail. He says, tell me, was there a wedding, Hanukkah 1805? He says, okay, I'll check it out. He opens up the records, says, yes. Yukatil Alpert got married here in 1805 on Hanukkah. He says, really? And who was the caterer? Who was the sheikhet? Oh, the sheikhet was the famous sheikhet of the town, a God-fearing Jew. He was the one who shechted all the chickens. He says, really? Okay, I'm going to talk to him. He goes to the sheikhet's house, knocks on the door. He says, tell me, were you the sheikhet for this wedding on Hanukkah in 1805? He says, yeah. He says, can you tell me something about the weddings? You guys, you don't let me alone. You continue to haunt me about that wedding. He says, really? What happened? He says, it's not that, God forbid, there was non-kosher chicken. So what happened? I'll tell you what happened, he says. On the way home from the wedding, I meet a Chabad chassid in the street. And he looks at me and he says, I cannot believe you. A God-fearing sheikhet should sell his soul for money? I had no idea what he was talking about. I said, what are you talking about? What do you mean? How did I sell my soul? I was hired to shech some chickens for the wedding. That's what I did. It's kosher chickens. The chassid pulls out from his pocket a letter from the Alter Rebbe, from Rabbi Aaron L. And he says, don't you know that the leading rabbis of our generation, including the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Aaron L., the author of the Shulchan Aruch and the Tanya, stated that no one is allowed to perform a wedding for Yukatil Alpert because he divorced his first wife, but they found the get, the divorce, to be non-kosher. And therefore they required him to redo the get. And until they redo the get, no rabbi is allowed to marry them off. And furthermore, any sheikhet who will slaughter chicken for the wedding, you should know that the chicken will be deemed treif, non-kosher. This was the story. When word got out about the story, the entire town went wild. Here we see how a rabbi came along and said, if you don't follow Torah law, the chicken that you slaughter, even halachically, ritually proper, will still be deemed treif. And this child who one day on the way home from school had this chicken soup, this had an impact on the study of Talmud for many years to come. And therefore they saw the greatness of the Alter Rebbe, and they saw the greatness of Rabbi Akiva Eiger. And therefore we understand that even though the Torah says Lo yisavashal gedi b'chalev imoy, not to cook the kid in the milk of its mother, but being that the Talmud explains that this means also the prohibition of eating, and also that today our rabbis tell us we have to wait 6 hours after we eat meat before eating milk, that all of this is part of the mitzvah, and all of this has an effect on the clarity of our minds and the vision of our heart to truly understand Torah and to see and perceive godliness. We hope and pray very soon to see the rebuilding of the third Holy Temple, as the Rabbeinu Bachai tells us that then milk and meat will be kosher together, a world of peace and tranquility for all nations and for all eternity.